But I think it's also important to understand, while nothing Donald Trump did after the election in connection with the lie about the election fraud, none of it is defensible. None of it is defensible. It's also a mistake, as some people have said, including on the committee, the commentators, that somehow this was a carefully planned coup d'etat aimed at the Constitution. That's not the way Donald Trump does things. It's rambling from one half-vast idea to another, one plan that falls through and another comes up. That's what he was doing. As I say, none of it defensible. But you have to understand the nature of what the problem of Donald Trump is. He's, to use a Star Wars metaphor, a disturbance in the force. And it's not an attack on our democracy. It's Donald Trump looking out for Donald Trump. It's a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence.
I don't know that I agree with you, to be fair, with all due respect. One doesn't have to be brilliant to attempt a coup.
I disagree with that. As somebody who has helped plan coup d'etat, not here, but other places, it takes a lot of work. And that's not what he did. It was just stumbling around from one idea to another.
Yes, folks, stumbling around from one idea. Just ideas. The ideas of coup d'etat. Hello, David.
Hey, man, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. Now, folks, we will talk more about John Bolton. Probably for patrons this weekend. Bronco March Teach will be joining us. It's unclear to me exactly what coups he's talking about. Like the one that well planned couldn't be the Venezuela one he's public about, because that seems to be bumbling from one dumb idea to another, like grenade drones and Guaido. But
Brazil, very cozy with Jair Bolsonaro.
There you go. I mean, it could be like Nicaragua, Cuba. I mean, the planning, but anyway, enough about John Bolton.
We'll talk more about it, but I do just have to say really quick. It's actually like John Bolton is an absolute ghoul and a monster, but he is also just such a strange guy that it's amazing that he has all of these kind of secrets like that. And he doesn't have the kind of like spy, like, oh, I can't tell you about what I've done in my past. Like he's getting personally offended at the insult to coup planners there by CNN.
You're right. We need new sort of like archetypes for that sort of figure, because it's not the James Bond type, obviously, but it's American, but it's not the quiet American, like, I don't really know what I'm doing sort of thing. It's just, it's bragging. A coup d'etat. He says it like somebody who really pronounces attorneys general.
Yes.
The proper way. I've planned multiple coup d'etat. Well, let's put you in jail. John Bolton for prison.
We got a lot coming today. We'll be joined in a little bit by Marcus from Left Flank Vets. I'm really looking forward to having him on the program. We've always enjoyed speaking with him. Later too, Matt has an update about Josh Hawley's most recent foray into transphobia, which shouldn't be too surprising for folks. Yeah. And we'll also have an update and a breakdown of what's going on in Sri Lanka too.
That's right. Packed show today. First, though, got a little bit of an inter-right squabbling to check in on, and our boy Donald Trump still has it, as it were. Let's start at the beginning. About June 14th, so about a month ago, the Texan ran this article announcing the victory of Mayra Flores for Texas's 34th congressional district, flipping the seat that has been under nearly unbroken Democratic control for 4 decades. Elon got in and said, I voted for Mayra Flores. First time I ever voted Republican. Massive red wave in 2022. Now, David, you're in Texas. Could you just contextualize let's say we take that at face value. What does that mean?
Oh, I mean, so Flores ran in a special district where there's going to have to be another election very soon. So it's a short term for her, but just as kind of MAGA QAnon as it gets. A huge QAnon supporter, and the majority of her campaign focused on 2 issues. One, dehumanizing rhetoric and language about migrants. She relied heavily on the fact that her husband is a Border Patrol agent. She ran ads basically with all those kind of Republican fear mongering things, which like our country is being attacked by an army of dangerous migrants. I mean, just really, truly as despicable as it gets there. And on top of it is a huge kind of MTG style QAnon supporter. Yeah, I mean, this is like the most fringe of the Republican Party stuff that you get. And I know we want to focus on how bad she is, but I do just have to remind folks that this was also a huge own goal from the Democratic Party because they thought, well, maybe if she wins this election, she'll be made public and people will be so disgusted by her that like we're going to handedly win the next election in the new district that's being drawn up. And yes,
So
the
clever.
new district that's being drawn up is a little bit more favorable. But when you see the state of the Democratic Party today, I don't want any kind of 3D, 4D chess from these folks. Also, it's like it's really notable, just like when I say that like the lack of campaigning. There you can see it in the fundraising where she raised something like $750,000 in contributions compared to $46,000 for her opponent. The Democratic Party ran almost no ads for him except like day of a Facebook little banner ad that's like vote Sanchez.
It's super dangerous. I was talking to my buddy Chris, like to expect that voters will just see that name on the ballot and assume that's the QAnon person that I see from cable news, which I don't fucking watch. Like that is ridiculous because people will just see like a female name and vote for that. I don't want to like that is something that like what happened in Chris's race is there was a woman who was married to a Republican, was a former Republican herself, ran a sort of like a Beto style progressive, but snowed people about her actual position. She was pro-life. She was going to say, argue from her position that it's okay to be pro-life as a Democrat. Okay, that person won that because there's a whole lot of turnout of people who didn't really know the deal. And luckily, the more progressive candidate ended up winning because in the runoff, Chris endorsed that person, and people turned out for the more progressive man. But like that's how they tried to sneak one in there. So like that is very stupid of the Democrats to try that.
And also, let's just note one more thing about their stupidity here. Now, Mayra Flores is the first Latina woman to represent the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, which is something that is absolutely ridiculous that the Democratic Party wasn't able to, take that position for themselves, right? I mean, you're allowing like the most far right QAnon person to be able to hold up that mantle of progress there. It's a huge own goal, but.
Yeah, and fair enough. R. Taylor, anti-choice. I should have said that. Good correction. So yeah. Anyway, you ready to move on to?
Let's do it.
Trump?
Yeah, because yeah.
So Trump hears what Elon says there, and he responds like this.
Another one of our highest priorities under a Republican Congress will be to stop left-wing censorship and to restore free speech in America. And go out.
Now somebody is crowding that lane a little bit, isn't he, Mr. Trump?
And go out, by the way, while I'm here and sign up now for Truth Social. It's hot as a pistol, and you see that. I call that one right. Leon's, I tell you what. Elon is not going to buy Twitter. Where did you hear that before? From me. From a fake account. She says fake. A lot of them. Nah, he's got himself a mess. He said the other day, I've never voted for a Republican. I said, I didn't know that. He told me he voted for me. So he's another bullshit artist, but he's not going to be buying it. He's not going to be buying it. Although he might later. Who the hell knows what's going to happen? He's got a pretty rotten contract. I looked at his contract. Not a good contract.
Trump is also very right about that, too.
This takes me back to 2015 so bad. And so I should just say, yes, it would be bad if Trump rides knocking these fools' heads around into another by the White House, and he would install even more right-wing judiciary, like probably bring Bolton back, whatever. Like, be bad. This shit is so funny because like his bravado, like they really don't have anything that can compare to it.
Yeah, I mean it is sort of awesome when Elon Musk, new resident of Texas and new barely resident of that district where he was voting in South Texas, because he spends most of his time in Austin, has been cozying up to like the Texas GOP, and they of course accept it because they love billionaires. But to do that, you also have to cozy up to the big man at the top, and it's just awesome that Trump is just Heisman in him.
Yeah. So let's see how Elon responds. This is to that video here. Elon says, "I don't hate the man, but it's time for Trump to hang up his hat and sail into the sunset. Dems should also call off the attack. Don't make it so Trump's only way to survive is to regain the presidency." That is interesting to me because I do think, look, I think the Jesse Ferraro tweet about Donald Trump will never be able to wriggle his way out of this one, and then he really, and then like Donald Trump wriggles his way off, like well, nevertheless. I think that is like the what's probably most likely. But put your chips on that. But from Donald Trump's perspective, it's like running for office gives you a degree of immunity from prosecution. So that's what Elon Musk is referencing there. Some guy says, look at all this great stuff Trump did. Elon says, yeah, but too much drama. Do we really want a bull in the china shop situation every single day? Exclamation point, question mark. Also, I think the legal maximum age for the start of presidential term should be 69.
Oh, epic clapback, Mr. Master.
That's
69,
so epic.
bro, my favorite number.
And we'll just put one final, Truth Social, which maybe we should get a Left Reckoning Truth Social account.
It's red hot, baby. It's hot as a pistol.
It's hot as a pistol. Trump says, when Elon came to the White House, actually, this is too small. We got to look at it this way. When Elon came to the White House asking me for help on all of his many subsidized projects, whether it's electric cars that don't drive long enough, driverless cars that crash, or rocket ships to nowhere, without which subsidies he'd be worthless, and telling me how he was a big Trump fan and Republican, I could have said, drop to your knees and beg, and he would have done it. Look at that picture.
So we use this as a thumbnail for today, but like this is one of the most powerful things of the Trump presidency is the way that he took these photos where he'd make everyone else just look horrible and goofy. This is a masterclass of Trumpism right there.
It's that, I mean, exactly like the Romney photo. Remember that one? And it says, P.S. Was Elon allowed to break the $15 million stock purchase barrier on Twitter without any reporting? That is a very serious breach. Have fun, Elon and Jack. Go to it. And there's Jack Dorsey.
Is that real? That one looks photoshopped.
It looks photoshopped. I think that's just Jack Dorsey. I think Jack Dorsey is.
I mean, I guess you can see him on the desk.
Yeah, he's done so much fucking like meditation that he just appears photoshopped in real life.
He's a spirit.
So yeah, beautiful, beautiful time.
Yeah, let them fight, man. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to watch, and not to make social media everything, but I do have to note that Musk did not get very good numbers for a Musk tweet on his clapback at Donald Trump, which should be a good indication to most people about where a lot of Elon's people sort of lie on these questions.
Not looking good, folks. Not looking good.
Well, y'all, we got a lot coming up. We got Marcus in just a second. Just want to shout out a couple things that we're working on. First up, very soon, hopefully next week. If I say that, then maybe that means I'll have to do everything to make it happen. We got merch. We got these hats. We got T-shirts coming out. We got a really cool design on our T-shirt, and we also have a tank top with a burning big text, which I'm looking forward to seeing everybody out there enjoying the summer with. This weekend. There we go. Yeah, show that to folks. I don't think there you go. And our good
designed by my buddy Grant Earl, who designed the logo.
Yeah, so look out for that. We'll also be launching a website and also some really exciting stuff coming up in August. I don't want to announce anything until we have it all sort of set up, but there'll be new offerings and also a new collaboration coming in very soon, which I'm looking forward to. This Sunday, we're going to be joined by our good friend, Bronco March-Teach. We're going to be talking a little bit about SCOTUS. Maybe we'll see if we can get him to talk a bit about Bolton. He has a new piece in DeSantis. I mean, you can really bring a Bronco on and talk about anything. And always
all-rounder.
Listen. So really looking forward to having him on the program. Much, much more. And before we go over to Marcus, I wanted to remind people about a podcast that you should all be listening to by our good friends Danny Bessner and Derek Davison, the American Prestige Pod. The world is growing more complicated by the day, but too often everyone seems to be operating on the same assumptions about world affairs. Not sure that world domination by the United States is the right path for America or the world? Have questions about conventional geopolitical thinking? Looking for a new perspective? Every week on American Prestige, historian and former Bernie Sanders advisor Daniel Bessner and journalist Derek Davison analyze U.S. foreign policy from a critical framework that sheds light on the myriad of topics related to international affairs. If you're curious to know what U.S. foreign policy would look like if the interests of all people in the world and not only rich Americans were taken into account, then you have to tune into American Prestige. You can listen to American Prestige on AmericanPrestigePod.com on your favorite podcast app and in the Substack iOS app. I very highly suggest listening to it. I also suggest people check out the interviews that we've done with both of them. We always learn so much hanging out with those guys.
Yep, a couple of clever guys. That was my. They didn't put that in the copy. That was my addition.
Thanks for letting us know. All right, well, should we bring Marcus on?
Yeah, let's bring him on. You'll see him at twitch.tv/leftflankvets. Also seen his work on This Is Revolution podcast. Marcus, where else will people have seen you?
So I've also have a call-in show that we kind of just switch over from Twitch, which, you know, you're on the Revolutionary Tracks, where we just talk about music and culture with my friend Karthik, which I don't know if I should even say this, but like he just found out he got like extended his visa today, so like I'm just even like super pumped for him. So shout out to Karthik and, you know, like everything that we'd be able to do. But other than that, yeah, just shit posting on Twitter, and getting people mad at us, which, you know, we'll probably get into a little bit later. But I also, if I could just say, yes, absolutely do it. Get yourself a Truth Social. We've got a left link. That's
really
Truth Social. Yeah. And it's worth it. You know, it's worth it because the comments, obviously, you know, like getting Trump, you know, is something I like. I'm not gonna lie, I miss it. But the comments too, that's, oh man,
Is he really active on Truth Social? Is he posting as much as he was on Twitter?
No.
So he slowed it down a little bit. Okay.
It's not as it's not as aggressive as he was on Twitter. But yeah, it's still, I mean, the whole Elon thing, that was at least one of my favorite things of the week, at least.
So. I know, it's great. This is what we got to do, though, David. We have to start doing special edits for our Truth Social content, where it's just the parts where we say Trump is good and funny, and all the parts where we're critical about him, we edit out, and then we just post that, and then our Patreon, and we'll see if we can. It'll take a little bit more work, but.
Just if you want to throw in there that you're a group of post 9/11 veterans, like, go ahead, Steel of Valor, like, you've got our blessing.
Great. All right. Well, I'll take that to the bank. Well, speaking of post 9/11 veterans, Marcus, I'm glad to finally get the chance to interview you about this, because I've been familiar with the Left Flank Vets Twitch for a while, but I don't think I've ever heard you actually tell your story. So I'm just curious, you know, your journey to the military. I'm somebody who still gets, not still, I'm 33 now, so the recruiters have stopped calling, but late into my 20s was getting calls because I was inspired by Jarhead and gave my info to some recruiters, and then like got cold feet. And it's like I was also turning anti-war at that point, so it was a little bit of a confusing time in my life. But I'm curious what your journey to the military was.
So I think like a lot of like military, you know, or at least vets now is like I've got family, you know, like my dad was in the Army. I've got cousins, uncle, you know, even granduncles that have served in you know, my parents are Jamaican. So even into, you know, like the Jamaican armed forces, you know, it was kind of an option, but then also like the time of my life, I was bartending, you know, spending most of my life just getting wasted. And so yeah, you know, like when I'd joined, I was just kind of like literally like lost. And I guess like the only good thought that I had was, if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to end up dead, like very young and like tragically. The really like dumb thing that I did after that was like join the Marine Corps infantry.
Right.
But really it was that like, oh, hey, like literally like this is what dudes in my family can do in order to, get by for a few years and then eventually, get a good job afterwards. And that's something that I literally was raised under, like my dad, like I grew up mostly, like my life, my dad was fixing hospital equipment in Ohio, that's so like, it was like kind of just like this option of like, this is better than, drinking yourself to death, I guess.
And I mean, so you experience like why other options aren't put on the table for folks, right? Like why college isn't made easier, why all things like that. Like, I mean, it's a regular story, but it's so. And so I guess like since you've moved to media, like I assume been hearing that exact story from vets all over the country.
Yeah, no, and that's where for you, like we got to remember too that like the military recruits, young people. I like I was a little bit later on, but that's part of the goal, and that's kind of like all where it feeds into. But like, yeah, at the end of the day, no one goes into the military wanting to be an imperialist. No one like goes in there, like it's the war, like especially like the US media paints it as something, and then for a lot of people it's just there's so many people that like I knew from whether it's the city or rural areas, you like it's just a lot of kids that didn't have a lot of good options. And honestly, too, like it lived their life and avoided some of the things where you'd be discounted in the military, like i.e., like drug charges, whether you've got some type of like disability, breathing disability, which like that's the thing too is like there is like a kind of like a skew to like like poor or just like lower middle class, whatever you want to develop on the economic ladder. But yeah, basically paycheck to paycheck people, and who have also kind of avoided like the worst ills of our society.
Do you remember your recruiting experience?
Yeah, actually, like pretty vividly. Which, I mean, like for me, I guess it was like it was pretty easy because it was like I knew, hey, I could just do this, so it was just like, all right, sign me up. I had to wait some time to make sure like I wasn't pissing hot, which are like like for weed. But there's I mean the things that I most remember are like the specific lies, the you're gonna go in and do this job and that's not what it like, or even a lot of it is around the culture and ideology. A lot of people from the like outside, you see like the Marine Corps, like the dress blues and or the the badasses in the military. What you get on the inside, there's actually tomorrow I should say, there's a documentary releasing on Vanessa Guillen, who was raped and beaten to death and then hidden in a pit somewhere in the desert at a Fort Hood. And that story is one of the like worst, it's one of the biggest travesties out there, but like that this type of thing is not uncommon. And yeah, that's kind of one of those things of like, yeah, you're recruiting to like you're a liar, and like you're lying to kids, like you're lying to like young people like who are kind of like just really searching for a way to get by.
I'm reminded, this is the thing that brought me to TikTok, and then I'll let David get a word in. But I assume you saw this, Marcus. This is stunning.
Hey Omar, if you could say one thing to your recruiter, what would it be?
Fuck you.
Hey, word. Yeah. If you could say one thing to your recruiter, what would it be?
That was fucking bullshit.
Hey. If you could tell one thing to your recruiter, what would it be?
Fuck you.
If you could say one thing to your recruiter, what would it be?
Hope he dies.
Hey, if you could say one...
I mean, you get the point.
Yeah.
Shit's wild.
Yeah.
It's just like it's just so wild. I mean, because I remember, because I grew up I grew up very poor in a poor area, and like they recruited heavily, like at my high school and all around us. And I can't remember if I was 16 or 17, but you can basically sign like an intent at that age, so that like once you get older, like they hit you back up. And I signed then because I had every intention of joining the military, because like you, like I had a lot of military. My family didn't really have like a plan for doing college and things like that. But I ended up not doing it, and I would get constant calls from these guys. And I remember though, just like one call in particular, I'm just saying, like, just like how like nasty this stuff can be. Is like this guy calls me up and he starts talking to me, and I'm just let him go. And he's just like, I know you just had a kid. Things are very stressful. You don't know what's going on in your life. By the way, I don't have a kid. I didn't have a kid, but like, it was just like a script that like, if he caught you at the right time, and knowing what's going on with a lot of people my age and that community at that time, like you could just shoot in the dark and probably get somebody with a line like that. And just realizing like how cynical that entire operation is. It's like trying to prey on people. I mean, because Lord, you're 17, 18, you have a child, you don't really know what's going on next. Like that's a lot of pressure on you. And like that is a very effective pitch to say, like, here's a solution to your problem that I'm offering you. But obviously it's as we saw from those guys who, it's a bad bargain.
Well, and the thing that really kind of sucks, and like this is something that like people kind of got to deal with, and this is actually gonna get worse, is compared to like they call it civilian life. If you've never been in the military, this is just life as an American. It is way easier. Like when it comes down to how I go about like paying, like what I have to do to pay bills, like what happens when I have to move, like it's just way easier in the military. And like this is the thing too, is like there's recruiters on the inside, right? Those are career planners. And like right when you're about to get at like those same type of thing, and like really like your whole, especially like in the Marine Corps, your whole Marine Corps career, you're told, you're literally not good as anything else other than a Marine. If you were good at something else, you'd be somewhere else. But guess what? You're here with us. So, but that's the thing, is that like there's a lot of people who stick around because they know like they're not getting anything better anywhere else. And that's something that like actually, like throwing out, like the Michael Brooks quote, as far as how you treat systems versus people, and that's just something that's like, if you are on the left and you want to actually tackle anti-imperialism, you want to tackle the U.S. military industrial complex, that's a recognition that, or like you got to make the recognition of like these are like there's a lot of people who are just literally just trying to make money, feed their kids, and they recognize that outside sucks, because it does. When you're trying to get health care, trying to pay rent, it sucks way more outside of the military, and that's kind of apparent. But
yeah, how did your politics develop? Were they pretty developed going in, or did they develop while you were in?
No,
Yeah.
I mean I was a moron. I was like, play a lot of sports, just like to get drunk, like just, nice meathead idiot.
Right.
It was after my second deployment, which there's like moments in time, where like really it's like kind of like the look that I've got that you get on like people's faces, where it's like you kind of like, well, why are they looking at me so mean? I'm just here to help. But after my second deployment, I just kind of just like started like wondering, like, I don't really understand like why I was where I was, what we were doing, and I guess like some part of it was like an earnest, like, what's the actual mission, like let me start like putting some pieces together. But then when you start pulling on that thread, there's really no good answers. This is also the time when like the first Bernie Sanders campaign was kind of going around. And paying, just even like being, like, I guess it was like I found a lot of left media I found the majority report or like TYT and I don't know, like Kyle Klinsky. There's like a whole mix of like left media that's still like, going on today. And thankfully so, because like they're like random service members sitting in their barracks rooms that are like getting swept up and being able to answer some questions that really don't get answered anywhere else or even try to be tackled. But that's kind of where it started. And then after, I left the military, I literally tried to do, I guess like the liberal way, like I used my veteran status in order to, advocate for certain issues around student loan debt, around housing, around uh, incarceration, and through trying to solve those problems. I ended up working as a staffer for like a member of Congress, like I'd really, bought in to try. And yeah, in that effort to solve issues for my community, within, some of the more established apparatus, it's just like those failures. COVID was like kind of like the exclamation point on it. Because I don't know if you saw like the recent reporting on the Paycheck Protection Program and about, I think it was like 800 billion spent, about like what 80% of it just went didn't even make it to like any workers or anything like that. That was a bill that like I saw intimately like as it went through, and like that seeing how that happened in the end result, which was just so many small business owners like calling and saying like, what the fuck, like I need help, like what's happening. It was like, we like none of you all care, this is this is a mess. And that's kind of when I think I got a lot more like I guess radical, in my day-to-day action and not really saying, like buying into any of these established institutions.
Right.
So one thing that it really infuriates me, frankly, but I see it a lot on the left, and I'd be curious to hear like your interactions with it and experiences with it, is like people who are very far away, one who didn't like serve, and then also are probably far away from people who actually were in the military. They have this kind of like moralism, right? Like screw all the soldiers, screw all the veterans. Like I don't care like what their political positions are. They're bloody, dangerous, bad people, and they should have no place on the left. Which I just like, if you don't recognize, if you're a leftist and you don't recognize the systems that prey upon the poor, as we were just talking about earlier, and pull them into that service, give people like a life debt to make sure that, for like 4 years or something like that, so that maybe they can go to school or get a paycheck or whatever. If you don't recognize those systems, I don't know. I have some words for you, but I'm just curious, because y'all do a project, Left Flank Vets. Y'all are open about this kind of thing. One, what you would say to somebody like that, and two, I'm just curious if like you think that's like a large portion of people, or
Yeah, no, and this is something that like I think I speak like with vets, and it's like our DMs and like that's things like if you're a vet, like we don't answer a lot of DMs. If there's a veteran that says, "Hey, I'm a vet, and can you talk to me about this?" Like, I don't think we've missed not one of those. So, we got a Discord as well. Like I don't know the link. You'll find it. But if you're a vet and you want to talk about these issues, or and then, like I'll probably give you the same answers. Like this, I think is very much an online, type of phenomena. Or whatever. It's just like a very online thing. I've not yet been like in person anywhere where like someone is, like, oh, you're a vet and, all these type of shit, especially if like we're like in the action of doing something good. But I mean, yeah, since like a lot of things, it's just like happens online. If I can tell someone's from the United States, like you can eat shit. Like I really don't care. Like, hey, you're you're paying for the great Satan, so like whatever, I don't care. But when it does come to people from countries where our imperialist project has like directly affected, which is like a lot, there's a lot of people who have a right to talk shit about me, and like that's just okay. And like my feelings aren't gonna be hurt. Like I need to take that and understand like obviously why they're upset. I like I've obviously wasn't engaged in all of the US, but like you could put that on me. and that's just something that I got to feel that pain and hopefully use it to do something good. So
Right.
it kind of depends on who's talking shit,
Mhm.
depending on how I react.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's use that veteran status against a couple of non-vets now. You got into we'll title these like vet response to James Lindsay. So you got into a an exchange with our boy James, and I don't know if I'll be able to follow this entire thread back. Oh yes, okay, so yes, we can follow it all the way back. This is a classic James Lindsay, mashed potato brain. Says, I'm not quite sure how to outline in a Twitter thread, but I'm going to try. It's a theological point on the evolution of Marxian religion from Marxism to neo-Marxism, of which the woke is a post-SWAT adaptation guy. So blah blah blah, right? And you responded with the crying Jordan Peterson. What does MRW mean?
My reaction one.
My reaction, I haven't seen that one. My reaction when I read a really high level idea like this, he says, you would, great stuff. And you respond, you would try to cancel us troops the day after 9/11, James. Completely unacceptable. Thank us for our service right fucking now. And James says, you were right with your crying image, cry babies, LOL. You say, I was part of the 174th Marine Rangers. Do you even know how much discipline and fortitude that requires? We don't talk shit like this from worms like you. I've only ever cried twice in my life. One, once the day those towers fell, and second, when my stepdad, Roger, told me is proud of me. Stay on topic, he said. And he says this, which is one of my favorite tweets of Twitter, which has come from this mathematician who turns into a culture warrior named James Lindsay. Denounce communism and thereby uphold your oath to the Constitution, then, Marine. Now, publicly. Now, my question was like, is that against the Constitution? Like, what?
So he's kind of correct.
Correct. Okay. Yeah,
he's kind of right. Yeah. So here's like I guess anti-military hack. Like just tell a recruiter openly you're a communist, a proud communist, and they honestly should leave you alone. It is one of the questions of that it's like on they got a questionnaire of like have you committed any crimes, that's not whatever the hell. And yeah, one of them's like, are you communist, or a member of the Communist Party? But yeah, so he's kind of right on that. This I do have to admit, so Left Flank we're a co-op. There's a few of us. This was another member, Dick, who is he's very good at just like trolling the idiots online. Yeah, that's like, it's kind of funny that I don't even know if he actually knows that, but it is kind of true. But also too, it's like,
well, he's a free speech guy. Why would he know that?
Right. But the quote tweets to that, actually, because we said, I was like, oh man, let me just reminisce on this one. The quote tweets to the like we're in the 174th Ranger, like all that is just like a bunch of bullshit that like Dick makes up, that it like makes people believe we're not really veterans, but hearing all the like that's not actually real, when it's like obviously, like we know, but
well, as somebody who was a Marine and learn how to be in combat, I would be curious if you could do a quick analysis of James Lindsay's swordsmanship real quick for us.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Yeah, what would you think if you saw this in the field? How much backup are you calling? Are you calling in airstrikes? Like, what's the
like, that is the least dangerous thing that I've ever seen.
Maybe for you, but not for him.
Yeah, that's something that I do find interesting. Like, obviously, like, I don't put any emphasis on like masculinity, but like the people who are like the most like it's like loudest proponents for it, like they don't quite fit the mold, so it's always interesting.
And it's like, I don't know, just because you do some bullshit like stunt about CRT or whatever the hell, like you don't get to like command soldiers. Like, I don't know what.
It's, but it's that like the whole thing too is that like, and we like a lot of times will absolutely like play on that of like, no, if you're gonna troop worship, no, thank us for your service. Yeah, we're commies now. And like we've gotten people to like comply, like, and it's like this weird thing of like they will even bow down to their own like demands of patriotism,
Yeah.
even though like, oh, you commies are ruining the country, but I thank you for your service. It's like this weird fucking thing.
That's lovely. I just want to bring up. So Steven Crowder, it's not enough for him that communist is officially banned, but he says any woke active duty, and he capitalizes woke, any woke active duty soldiers who have no sense of loyalty to the country should not be in the military. Now, I mean, generally, I'm curious about your reaction to that tweet, but also like, I've heard that the military is having trouble recruiting. So like, and partially it's because the right has like said they're part of like a like ultra woke like trans affirming army or something like that, like, right, like, so they're having trouble recruiting from. So I'm just curious, like, your reaction on like the recruiting stuff, because when we're not like, we hear like recruiting problems is that's not necessarily a dire thing, but I'm just curious what your reaction is.
No, and this is like one of those things where you really got to engage the materialism to take the good, but like understand like where lies are just being told, because like the thing is too is like they're kind of the reactionary right is burning the candle at both ends. On one end, when you're talking about like this overemphasis on the woke military, I mean, Dick and I actually read this. Like, there's a guy who like wrote a book about it, and it's like kind of ties it and like very heavily relies on Jordan Peterson. But yeah, so they are depressing, people wanting to join the military, like who are on the right saying, oh, it's just going to be a bunch of, woke libs in there. But then also you got things like January 6th, where like literally that's kind of showed of like how the emphasis on the military, the fact that the 3%ers and the oath keepers and all these people they recruit, like that is turning really like some of like just like kind of like middle ground people saying like, oh, if I join the military, then like I might end up in kind of these avenues. So yeah, and like if you're on the left and you're kind of seeing this, just kind of like just back away and kind of like let them do the de-recruiting work for us. But also, really like it's not true. That's there's the thing is too is that and something that like I guess I struggle with is the question of like what would some type of militarized or like force look like. What should we do with like the mass amounts of equipment that like I think could be used, especially like to save people from climate crisis events and stuff like that, which is going to be increasingly happening over, there's a use, for like able-bodied young people to like go out and risk their lives, there's really not a use for like doing it with you for the United States or like the stuff that's going on the border,
right,
where Texas is engaged like the National Guard, the Texas like military, which like I can't remember what it's called, but like Texas has their own separate little like National Guard thing.
No, I mean it's worth re-upping because it's really crazy. Like Operation Lone Star, he's scrambled the Texas National Guard to go out there and basically do a parallel border operation to the federal border policy. And because you're pulled up by the state government, not the federal government, you get paid less. If you are killed in action, which people have died, you don't get that immediate check or like it taken care of. You have to file workers' comp thing with like the government, which takes forever, and you only get like a portion of your salary in the first place. And in response to that, because of the Biden administration, I don't know if y'all have covered this on Left Flank, but there's a union attempt of unionization of the Texas National Guard, because the Biden administration, it is illegal for the military to form a union. But the Biden administration basically said that they're not going to prosecute it, which has sort of opened up an interesting space. They won't prosecute it for state level National Guard deployments. So it's an interesting moment.
Yeah, and that's something that's like I think with they also trying to like very much this is from the Biden administration define it into this pay and benefits to of other like comparable state level employees and stuff like that, which bare minimum, which like I hope that like some of these but yeah, no, I've paid pretty close attention about some of that unionization work because yeah, a lot of it was just saying you know what happens if everything wrong like happens and like those guys could have been like potentially arrested, like there could have been like you could like I can't think of the word treason, all this type of stuff like that if like they want to go as hard as they could in the wrong direction because yeah, if you're in uniform you start saying no and you don't know your legal rights, the United States government can really come down on you and like CC, Chelsea Manning, reality winner, Daniel Hale.
Right. I mean, I really like what you said about there being a use for like deployable force of able-bodied people with all the problems we're going to have. And like, there's also a willingness, like, I mean, like to like actually go do something positive with what you're capable of doing. I mean, that's why I almost joined when I was in high school. It wasn't that close, but why I like was toying around with it because it's like neither of my parents went to college. So like, the promise, I wanted to get out of North Dakota. My dad asked me, like, because he was tired of getting those phone calls when I was like 26. He's like, why did you tell him you were even interested? I'm like, because I wanted to get out. And I wanted like to get out of North Dakota, frankly.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, and you see all this propaganda about actually you're going there and you're doing this great stuff, like putting generators in. And that anybody who is sees that and follows that, I think like you said, understanding people and understand the systems is the problem and not the people, because I mean I think it's very obvious how we need to channel that better, I guess is what I'm saying. Youthful humanities capability, we need to channel that a lot better than we're doing.
Yeah, and like look at firefighters, right? Like there's probably a lot of firefighters that are just absolute like assholes, but like no one's got a problem with firefighters. There's people who, and like that's these. There are people who are willing to say, "Yeah, I'll put myself in danger just to help," and it works out. And like we're gonna need some more of that. And if there was a comment that I saw, I was like asking about like the climate change and like like the military being like the largest polluter and stuff like that. Really, at the end of the day, it was like most of the stuff needs to get torn down, like scrapped, like. And the thing is too is like every day you've got training and stuff like that. They're just burning fuel, prepping for war. So like that's like probably like a lot of it. Like some of the like most of the ships don't run on nuclear energy. There's just a huge tank of diesel, powering this fucking ship. There's no sails on this motherfucker. This is all Detroit diesel engine power, baby. And it's just like dumping all the trash. Oh, like we don't need that. Like park the boat strategically. You're gonna have to do some drills to make sure people are prepped. But yeah, at the end of the day, like you can get rid of a whole lot of it, but like having a vehicle that can, traverse some dangerous area, get some people out, save some other people, that's gonna be necessary more and more. And hopefully that would be like the only thing salvageable out of the military industrial complex.
Yeah, one detail about the waste of fossil fuels during military training. There's a story in Stephen Kinzer. It's in, I think, Overthrow. And he's talking about, I think it was Kermit Roosevelt. And they were like doing Iran coup stuff. And he it was really fucking hot, so he turned on to get air conditioning. He went in the plane. They turned the airplane on, and he just like the airplane engines were just burning fuel. And he's like, "My taxes pay." He was like some rich, it was from the Roosevelt family. He's like, "My taxes pay for this. Keep it on." So yeah, that's how they think of fossil fuels.
Yeah.
Marcus, thank you so much, man. Twitch.tv/leftflankvets. Colin, Revolutionary Tracks, which David and I were on a week or two ago. And also on This Is Revolution podcast. Really great talking to you, Marcus.
Yeah, and thank you. And if I can say, once again, get on Truth Social. It's a good time. It's hot like a pistol. But also, the Left Reckoning romper was a good idea in the chat. I
That
would
sounds
definitely
like
buy
fun.
one.
Let's do
Yeah.
that.
We'll see that. We might
Thanks
do.
so much.
Yep. See, Marcus.
Thanks,
We'll
Randy.
take the romper under advisement.
I know. That was great. I
Oh.
appreciate. It's always great chatting with him.
Yeah, and people check out the Twitch stream. It's one. I mean, often if you're a Twitch user, I often raid them from majority. But if you haven't, really good feed that I always like to see going in the afternoons when I get done with work. So great talking to Marcus. Let's talk about something that frankly is pretty disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
The ongoing attacks on trans people, the Adam and Eve fundamentalist bigots like Matt Walsh posing the question, "What is the woman?" without being able to answer that in a way themselves. Of course, there was an exchange the other day between Kiara Bridges and Josh Hawley of Missouri, and this goes to this question of what is a woman, and I think some folks might need a little bit of a remedial walkthrough on this. So that's what Dave and I are going to try to provide for you today. But I want to post this, and there's certain maybe. Well, I want to play this first, and then we can talk about where we may. But I think this is a pretty good exchange.
Professor Bridges, you said several times, you've used a phrase, I want to make sure I understand what you mean by it. You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's rights issue.
We can recognize that this impacts women while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley.
Oh, so your view is that the core of this right then is about what?
So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, and it opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing that.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks who can have pregnancies?
So I want to note that 1 out of 5 transgender persons have attempted suicide. So I think it's important
because of my line of questioning? So we can't talk about it?
Because denying that trans people exist and pretending not to know that they exist.
I'm denying that trans people exist by asking you if you're talking about women having pregnancies?
Do you believe that men can get pregnant?
No, I don't think women can get pregnant.
So you're denying that trans people exist?
And that leads to violence? Is this how you run your classroom? Are students allowed to question you?
Absolutely.
Or are they also treated like this, where
No,
they're told that they're opening up people to violence?
We have a good time in my class. You should join.
I bet.
You might learn a lot.
Wow, I would learn a lot. I've learned a lot just in this exchange.
Absolutely.
Extraordinary.
Yep.
So, I mean, Dave, do you want to jump in or go ahead? It sounds like you got something to say.
I mean, he's just such a nasty freak. I mean, I just wanted to say up top that, like, the thing about Holly and her reaction there just being very correct is that, you know, while, like, you know, there is, as you know, for some folks, like, it's worthwhile to have the patience to try to, you know, explain things for folks because people aren't exposed to the same kind of things. I'll also say, as somebody, you know, who grew up in the queer community here, I've known trans people my entire life, and a lot of the language stuff has, like, shifted or changed, you know, or, you know, so it's like, you know, it's not even necessarily even about exposure, you know, that kind of thing. So it's like, you know, certainly having patience. But the thing is with Holly right there is he's not doing this because he genuinely has questions. He's doing this to present himself in a certain way to his rabid you know, fans, and, like, that is when you can treat somebody with, you know, contempt and to go at them as quickly as she did there, because that is not like Holly just, like, genuinely wanting to be educated on a subject, but rather trying to, you know, deny people's humanity.
Yeah, he doesn't have questions. He has an ideological position that he's putting forward. And I just want to, I paste this a lot, but I mean, this is just for folks who are genuinely concerned or, like, might not have the background and have been, you know, snowed in by, because there's a lot of people, it's not just the right wing who is paying homage to this. Oh, the left can't even say what a woman is.
Betty Midler.
Exactly, right. And so let's see, I can find this. Oh crap! I lost my spot. Sorry, David.
It is amazing just seeing for some of the headlines in there, which I think everybody predicted from the get-go, is how quickly this has gone from questions about the integrity of women's sports
Yes.
to like a direct attack on people.
A denial that trans and non-binary people even exist.
Yeah.
So this is from the USA. This Jordan Young says, a biologist, there isn't one single biological answer to the definition of women. There's not even a single biological answer to the question of what is a female, Jordan Young said. There are at least 6 different biological markers of, quote, sex in the body: genitals, chromosomes, gonads, internal reproductive structures, hormone ratios, and secondary sex characteristics. None of the 6 is strictly dichotomous, Jordan Young said, and the different markers don't always align. And just like the easy example that I would give people is, like, first of all, do you believe that non-binary people exist? If you don't, you're basically an Adam and Eve style, like, fundamentalist, and you've been misled, and you're probably from like a very sheltered community, sort of thing like that, right? Like, it's just you, and you need to be brought out of your ignorance, or you can double down and be part of a political project attacking these people. But let's say you're assigned female at birth, but you do not relate to that position, that gender at all. You can mark down they, them on your forms. And if somebody, and this guidance that people always get upset about, where it's like, say pregnant people, that's what you should say if you were treating them as a patient. You shouldn't call them a fucking woman, because you'd be an asshole for doing that. It's just simple, right? That person can still get pregnant, and calling them a woman is just, I mean, it's an asshole, but it's an asshole for this like Bible time fairy tale about what gender is, right? And it's detached from reality. And that's what's so frustrating about this, is it's like, this is just an updated way for like Adam and Eve style fundamentalist bigots to participate in modern sounding hate that gets a wide audience.
Yeah. And like, more specifically, like when talking about the abortion stuff, is I think the way that she framed it in that discussion was she did a very good job of that, saying that this affects women doesn't necessarily, saying that this affects groups other than women doesn't exclude women from it, right? These things aren't mutually exclusive. And there is this kind of like push from the right wing to make it seem like that's what people are saying, in the same way that, like, when we say on this program that abortion rights are a class issue, that's not saying that it's also not a women's rights issue, or also saying that it's not a trans issue. And I think just being able to be clear about these things is, it doesn't take a lot of thinking to get that. I think the people who are hardliners against, being a little bit inclusive, obviously are betraying a bit of internal bigotry. But also, I think like it's worthwhile to remember that it's like being inclusive and including rather than excluding, and also like obscuring, if that makes sense, right? Like, it's not necessarily wrong for someone to say like this is a women's issue, especially if for the fact that they are not saying that in a way to be exclusive to trans non-binary people. Right. And it's just like, learning how to be able to speak about these things is something that is very worthwhile for folks to be able to take a little bit of time to do. Like,
yeah, and this is both the deny they exist part that actually has extreme material consequence, because then you don't do transition care, right? Mm-hmm. Like any sort of transition care, it's the exact same. So there's again a symmetry between the anti-abortion stuff and the anti-trans stuff, and this fundamental thing that underlines it is people cannot be trusted to take control over their own health care. So you can't get an abortion if you decide you want one, and you can't get transforming care if you decide you're not. And it's all on the one hand on abortion. It's people, if you can't trust people to not get abortion right before they're supposed to have the baby, because women would just be doing that willy-nilly, because you can't trust women. And it's also, you can't trust these people to transition with doctor consent. We need to get a judge involved appointed by Republicans, because you can't trust the people with their health care.
And also, like, let's not forget how dangerous and damaging a lot of this freak out from like the liberal side has been, where like liberals have sort of flirted with this trans denial from people like Hillary Clinton, to people like Bette Midler and other folks, including the New York Times, which has published articles recently attacking trans people, saying that the far right and the far left are waging a war on women, which has now been cited by the Texas government in justification for their attempts to strip children away from their families who are caring for them and loving them by giving them the care that they need. Right? I mean, it is absolutely wicked stuff that is in full view right now, which people have been warning folks about for a very, very long time. Yeah, it's not a game, and like again, like being able to hold two perspectives at once is really crucial here. Like not being a vampire, right? And like freaking out if somebody makes a mistake or doesn't understand something, while also having the ability to fully respond rightfully to somebody like a Hallie who's not just asking questions. They are trying to make a definitive statement right there that is anti-human.
And they're the ones who make it so hard for people who like when there's like a sensitivity to slip ups and, so-called microaggressions or whatever, right? It's because people don't think that they might just be asking questions, but really they've been gassed up by these right wingers and like Bette Midler, right? Like a perfect example. This and I also just want to shout out Carl Bayer, friend of the show, had a good little blog on this that I'll let you behind the paywall on, just for the first couple of paragraphs. The bizarre controversy over birth giver. This is just the latest episode, and the right's continue to attempt to win arguments by changing the rules of English grammar. And he includes a screenshot of Rage Against the Machine, where it said forced birth in a country where black birth givers experience maternal mortality 2 to 3 times higher than that of white birth givers. Now, Carl says, I usually don't weigh in on gender issues since it just isn't my field, but the right has become so singularly fixed. Yeah, welcome to the club. And one thing I keep noticing in controversy after controversy is that a lot of the right's grievances about gender are really just grievances about semantics. Just look at the recent controversy over the term birth giver and mentions the Rage Against the Machine context.
Yeah.
Left is going to have a lot of predictable objections to this, but what strikes me is that this complaint doesn't even make sense if you're on the right. If you're on the right, the logical thing would be to insist that terms like birth giver are fine, but only refer to certain people. This is just the application of a basic rule of English, which is say you can add a suffix ist or to a verb to that verb's grammatical subject. Thus, a person who farms is a farmer, right? The right, everyone understands this, and if we were speaking normally, the right would only dispute the term birth giver when applied to certain people, right? They wouldn't take offense to it in generally, they would just take offense to it. But it's also funny because he finds an 1870 missionary tract from Catholics where moreover, contrary to what the right will tell you, the term itself isn't remotely new, nor is it remotely woke. In fact, one of the most common use of birth giver is found in Eastern Catholicism as a title for Mary, the birth giver of God. This is direct translation of the 3rd century term Theotokos, and it is in fact an important term in Eastern Catholic doctrine. The term is also occasionally used in reference to God, for instance, in this 1870. So,
yeah.
All the only reason that it is a problem is because we have an attack on trans people, and that people want to portray them as all just mentally ill. And I gotta say this also. I have a friend, very close friend, who recently came out as he they. They're going to do he they for a while. Maybe they eventually go they. It's unclear. But when that was revealed to me, my response wasn't, "Oh, you've been snowed by the trans woke brain virus that the DNC is pumping out for votes," or whatever the fuck the conspiracy theory is now. It was actually like, that kind of makes sense and good for you. Like when I hear this person describe themselves that way, it puts like we went through like their history and certain things fall into place a little bit. And it's a weight off this person's shoulders. It's not like some sort of like madness, which is what and the interesting thing is, in the context of the he they thing, maintaining the he because certain parts of that person's family are from areas that just aren't ready to be accepting of that shit because of these motherfuckers like Josh Hawley, because of that. And it's horrible. And everyone who is like Matt Walsh and the Matt Walsh Apologist Society absolutely ashamed themselves. And there's no question about this stuff. And the answers are only, but if you go to the wrong place for the answers, you might end up being a bigot.
I think that's well said, Matt.
Yeah.
Well, y'all, yeah, and we'll continue to be pushing back against this nonsense because, again, this is not just at this point at the level of personal grievances or like somebody being rude to somebody and us being mad about it. It's like this is bleeding over into politics and affecting so many people.
Yeah.
It's getting serious. Not that it wasn't serious before, but it's getting dire. But yeah, y'all. So we're gonna give you all an update on Sri Lanka. We've been wanting to cover this for a long time. It's tough because the situation is still so fluid. So we're gonna give you all an update and maybe more importantly, sort of fixate on how we got here. But I do just want to re-up immediately after the program. We're going to be going over to the post game where we're going to be talking a little bit about how AMLO made a recent visit to the United States and schooled Sleepy Joe on FDR. And also, we really didn't want to have to dedicate too much time to this, but I think we need to. It's important. We're going to talk a little bit about this election in New York, in the New York Senate, where Nomiki has sort of stepped over a few lines recently in some of her allegations against Gonzalez there. So we're going to talk about that all in the post game. You can get access to that if you are so inclined at patreon.com/left reckoning immediately after the main show finishes up.
Yep.
But yeah, let's go to Sri Lanka first. So people have probably seen a myriad of different images from the country, which has plunged into, chaos and upheaval after millions and millions of people have fallen into food insecurity, rampant corruption, and a very, very severe, and it looks like, unfortunately, prolonged economic crisis has set in. I do think that it's worth just noting for some people who might not be particularly familiar with Sri Lanka, just a couple quick facts about the country. It is an island nation, 22 million people, and it has also been host to a very, very brutal and prolonged ethnic conflict between the major ethnic groups in the country. And all the things that go into this, it's important to remember that this is always sort of in the background, this history of pain and devastation that have really been with the country for a very long time, but it flamed over over the past 100 years, particularly the past 50. But before we get into what got us here, let's sort of try to set the stage a little bit to where we are right now. This is courtesy of the good folks at Al Jazeera.
Sorry.
No worries. We'll get to that in a minute. Just watch this for a second.
They called Saturday D-Day, when protesters say the president and his government would be forced to step down. They blame Gotabaya Rajapaksa for an economic crisis that's made life unbearable for many of the country's 22 million people. After breaking through barricades, yet another unprecedented moment. The demonstrators stormed into the president's official residence in Colombo. Inside, this is what it looked like. The president was moved by his security team to an undisclosed location earlier, while protesters ransacked his bedroom and took photographs on his bed. Within moments, the presidential pool, once reserved for the country's top leaders, appeared more like a community pool.
Today is the Independence Day for me, being born in this nation, not 1948. Because today, we have fought for our freedom from the tyranny, from the scoundrels, from the blackguards, from the rascals, the rogues, and the greedy politicians who have run our nation below ground zero.
The 73-year-old president was elected in 2019. Analysts say it's only a matter of time before he's forced to step down.
As soon as the president's resignation is announced, the prime minister becomes the acting president according to the constitution, and that is for a period of 30 days, within which Parliament must decide who amongst its members will be elected to serve the remainder of Gotabaya Rajapaksa's term.
Anger is rising at the government's handling of a dire economic crisis, the worst in 70 years. The monthly minimum wage is about $80, and access to food, fuel, and medicine is limited, and the government has run out of foreign currency. Rajapaksa's political allies know this is a crucial moment for his presidency.
I'd say so.
Certainly, and that's dated now. That was over the weekend. The prime minister who'd be assuming the presidential roles had the prime minister's office occupied in a similar fashion this week as well. So it's an extremely fluid moment. Before we get into some of like the economic factors that have caused this crisis, again, going back to the ethnic conflict, it's worthwhile remembering that Rajapaksa, the former president, is a member of a very, very influential and powerful family in Sri Lanka that was very dominant, particularly in the period of the Civil War. The war ended in 2009, where one of his brothers was basically one of the major leaders in the victory of the Sinhalese people over the Tamil separatists there, right? And it's just important to remember that like this is a country that already just a decade ago we're not far away from that reality and that kind of crisis. And remembering that the party in power is very much a kind of ethno-nationalist party as well. So there's a lot of factors that go into this. Now, this economic crisis certainly sparked this. The PM will be the next president. The prime minister will be the next president, Wickremesinghe Singh. But he's seen as extremely close to the previous government. So he doesn't have a lot of legitimacy, as we can see from the fact that they have occupied his office as well. Remember, this is a country that's extremely indebted. Their debt load is something like $51 billion. Around 6 million people are food insecure. And this is not a small thing. This is not just sort of like we're routing off stats from the CIA fact book. This food insecurity is a direct result of policy from the government. And we're going to do a full breakdown in just a second. But I just wanted to note, again, we can't do, a full breakdown of what's happening because it's literally changing every moment, and by the time this gets clipped as a video separately, the situation will be completely different. But sitting here right now on Wednesday, the prime minister has told the military to do whatever is necessary to restore order in the country, and has issued a state of emergency. So there will be security forces crackdowns in the near future, and seeing what will happen next, it's going to be extremely volatile, and we'll be watching that as closely as we can. But if you want to pull up this thread, Matt, I think that this is probably one of the better kind of breakdowns to help people understand the economic factors here. And you can find this entire thread. I've retweeted it, but it is by Ramakumar, who is an economist. And let's just break down. I didn't do the entire thread. It's worth checking out. I think I can read the other ones, Matt. If you're able to read that first one, that'd be helpful for me, though.
Sorry, I don't know what the hell that was. The mic just dropped. This version here. To begin with, Sri Lanka's economic growth rate was on decline from 2012 itself. Its GDP growth rate fell rather steadily after 2012. The post-war growth acceleration petered out soon, and current account deficit widened in absence of export growth.
So we're going to talk more about this in a moment. I don't want to, utilize this to sort of make some points about some of the other political arguments that we have been in, but it is worth noting. You see this fall in GDP growth. Remember, Sri Lanka is a country that has been celebrated by many of the major figures of the degrowth movement. But let's move forward. The economy was stuck with the colonial era exports of tea and rubber, right? And that's something that's very difficult when you're an export-led economy. And garments. The exports of these commodities suffered as global commodity prices fell over the past decade, but two recent events in 2019 ended up imparting a major shock to the Sri Lankan economy. And these events were attacks by ISIS on the country, severe massacres. And this is a country that not only is an export driven economy, but it's also a country that is highly dependent on tourism. And I can't do a full breakdown of this concept for folks, but you have to remember when you're talking about countries, particularly in the developing world, that their ability to get foreign currency into their economy becomes very important, because most of the large organizations that they'd be buying food or like finished goods from want to they accept payment in dollars and maybe euros or maybe Indian or Chinese currency, but typically it's the dollar which dominates international trade. So tourism is a way to get money from foreign countries into your economy, and then after these terrorist attacks, people stopped feeling safe going to the country, which meant that there was a massive exodus of that kind of foreign currency in the country, and obviously much lower tourism revenues. This next one here. And while all this is happening, the president, who has now been deposed, cut taxes significantly across the board in the country. So at the same time where the economy is starting to contract because you're having these crises of lower tourism, also different movements in the global economy, which are basically making their exports less profitable for them, they also lowered the tax revenue of the country significantly, putting them in a weak position for what we all know is coming next, which is COVID-19. So you have a country that doesn't have a lot of capital at hand for the government to use to sort of fund social programs and things like that in that moment. At a time where basically tourism is certainly shut down, production is shut down. I mean, every country in the world went through a recession during the COVID pandemic. It was inevitable, and they were in a weak position. So to deal with this, Sri Lanka has taken a lot of debt on. So they've taken a lot of people. By the way, I just want to make this point real clear and real quick. Really fixate on the fact that they owe money to China, and certainly China's a player there, but they owe money to IMF, they owe money to India, they owe money to a lot of different institutions. So you have this crisis, and then of course, in the same way, when it comes to getting goods into your country, you're needing to use foreign exchange, foreign currency to do that. How do you think debt is denoted? It's not denoted in their currency, which means that then you have the crisis of having to get that currency. So you can either get that through things like tax revenue, through bringing money into the country through trade and tourism, or you buy them out in the open market. But again, if your currency is devalued compared to those things, it becomes harder and harder and harder for you to make those payments. So you have a situation where the country is now lowers their tax base, so they have less tax revenue in the first place, and then you're having this kind of monetary crisis as well. A lot of things happened that were bad economic policy, bad economic planning, but also just hitting it all at sort of the worst time to create this crisis. And now let's get into this next factor, because this is what exacerbates the crisis in this country. So he notes here, this is where the organic farming lobby entered the scene to fish in muddy waters. Homegrown anti-science enthusiasts and external advisors like Vandana Shiva, who, if people are unfamiliar with, is somebody who is a big proponent of a lot of these kind of anti-science agricultural policies, pop figure, particularly with an environmental movement, and certainly somebody who you'll see if you ever go on a page like David Avocado Wolf or those kind of very granola Facebook mom pages, right? This is somebody who they celebrate a lot. This influence comes into the country, and they advise the president that the pressure on foreign exchange could be stopped if they stopped importing fertilizers. Now, he doesn't note that here specifically. What they mean by that is like a fertilizer that has any kind of chemical aspect to it. So like to only use natural, traditional ways of fertilizing crops, which again, the advances in science and agriculture have been incredibly beneficial to the human species. Our ability to produce food for people is incredible right now. And we are in this bizarre moment where it's not so much of a crisis of producing food globally, as much as it is a crisis of distribution. That's where capitalism comes into this factor. But in this situation, there's this kind of fixation. It's like, oh no, we're going against nature. We're going against the natural order by using natural things, just used in a different way to provide food for people. But also note that, so there's an organic aspect of it too, but the way that they were able to get the government to go along with this was basically by saying, well, you'll be spending less money importing fertilizer from other countries that produce this good, so you have more foreign exchanges to use for other things. This was an absolute disaster. So internally, the president, Rajapaksa, presented himself as an organic farming messiah. He banned all chemical fertilizer from May 2021. And you should read this blog post by Rama Kumar there. It was written when this happened and really, unfortunately, predicted a lot of the damage that was going to end up happening. And maybe we'll talk about this. We can just get through this thread and talk about this at the end. But that specifically, this organic farming, this banning of fertilizer, was something that was promoted heavily, not only by that kind of anti-science GMO crowd, but was promoted heavily by these degrowthers, people like Jason Hickel, who people were noting as this crisis was happening, that he was tweeting out in support of all this stuff as it was going on, that Sri Lanka is actually not just a good, what's happening there is good, but actually it is a global model, and this is a model that the rest of the world should be following. Just remember that. People get mad at us about what we say about degrowth. The reason that we get mad about it is because a lot of these policies spell very, very serious devastation and damage for people. And, he doesn't want to be associated with it anymore because he's deleted all of his tweets in praise of it since then.
Did Shiva blurb degrowth book? I
100%
check that.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
I mean, I shouldn't say 100% because I could.
I think I saw
wrong,
she
but
did. People can correct
I'm
us,
almost
but yeah.
certain about that. But let's get through this thread and then we can open it up because it's worthwhile understanding all these things. So the organic farming thing and that crisis really exacerbated it because it took something from a monetary economic crisis into an actual food crisis. And as we noted at the beginning, 6 million people in the country are struggling just to get enough calories on a daily basis because of this disastrous policy. This is zooming down a little bit in the thread. I highly suggest people read the full thing. But the IMF's intentions were deeply suspect as usual. So again, the country's gone towards the IMF, which we know what happens when the IMF comes into a country. In 2016 itself, Sri Lanka had entered into a 36-month extended EFF arrangement with IMF for $1.5 billion to support an economic reform agenda. The conditionality of that set by the IMF was to reduce the fiscal deficit by 2020. What does that mean? Austerity. 16, the other IMF conditionalities follow the classic Washington consensus template. Reform of tax policy and administration, control over expenditures, commercialized state enterprises, exchange rate flexibility, boosted competitiveness, and free investment, and a free investment environment. So all these things are coming together at the same time. In all probability, Sri Lanka will now take out a new IMF loan with even more stringent conditionalities and move into yet another deflationary spiral. This, in the rightward shift in internal politics, will only worsen the conditions of the people's life and work. And that was in March 27. So more has happened since then, and as we've seen, it has sparked significant outrage. So much so that the president has been forced to resign, and he has fled the country to go to the Maldives.
That's horrible, and you don't like to see a practical demonstration of arguments you make. But I gotta say, the organic thing, keep that shit away from Green New Deal policy. It's unclear to me how much, Tucker was on board calling it a Green New Deal policy, and it's unclear to me exactly how much that's been put into the bills, because it's a really moving target what the Green New Deal is. But I have seen organic sort of groups say, hey, this is going to be good. And those folks need to be disappointed for this reason. You cannot fuck around with yields like that. This is real. Absolute, to stop importing fertilizers for economic reasons is insanity. And the left cannot be party to that.
No, it's extremely, extremely dangerous, especially when we're talking about world food systems that have become even more insecure, as our good friend Kowalski will remind us time and time again. I also just want to up something because someone noted in the chat that I said Jackson, I meant Jason Hickel. the degrowth economist. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that you're 100% right. That, like, people need to be very wary of this kind of stuff because, you know, there's these kind of like ideas about like how to be like closer to nature. You know, the stuff about trying to use less fossil fuels is good, but there's also an entire industry out there that has been trying to push you know, kind of irrational food production systems on people, and so that they can market certain products as better than others. um, Nothing wrong necessarily if you want to have, you know, an organic garden or farm even, but to do that as national agricultural policy is extremely damaging, because you need to make sure that there's enough food for people to be able to eat in your country. So if you wanted to understand like the context of this, understand it's like a convergence of a lot of different factors: a crisis of foreign exchange, a crisis of debt, bad policy making from, you know, significantly cutting taxes across the board, having the kind of organic food lobby, anti-science people come into your country and accept their policy suggestions, and obviously, you know, COVID-19 and terrorism, but also a government that many people have felt for a long time has been extremely corrupt. And, you know, obviously in these things, you know, people always want to know, well, what's going to happen next? I'm just going to sit here and say that I can't tell you what's going to happen next. I can tell you where I start to investigate something like that is to understand, one, when the reaction is about corruption, it sometimes is difficult to have a vibrant political movement that comes out of it. Doesn't mean that doesn't ever happen, but you know, when it's just solely a negative critique, and this is not against the protesters, what they're doing is 100%
Absolutely, yeah.
right. It's just trying to understand the dynamics at play as to like what might happen next. You know, all the people now who are upset about this, what is going to unite them? And, you know, there are really no guarantees that this is somehow going to be some kind of left-wing workers movement that will be taking place. What typically happens in moments of unrest is this whatever formulation that wasn't discredited with that former crisis that is the most organized. You know, for example, when you see the crisis in the Soviet Union, it was the communists who were extremely, you know, ready to go. In Egypt, when you saw the crisis, it was the Muslim Brotherhood, right? It's one of those things like this is just doing analysis, understanding in crisis moments. It's like, who's the most organized to be able to take advantage of a crisis like this? So I don't know what is necessarily going to happen. I do hope that they buck a lot of these policies, particularly food policies that have caused such devastation and unnecessary famine in that country.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be people's material well-being. That having a full belly. That's got to. I mean, that can't be fucked around with. Like I'll even be open to like experiments about pesticide-free farms, or whatever. You cannot implement that widely, and I think it's horrifying if that played such a role here.
Yep. Well, y'all, we're going to go over the post game. We're going to talk a bit about AMLO, and we're also going to talk about Nomiki in the Senate election in New York. You can get access to that at patreon.com/leftreckoning. And this Sunday, we're going to be joined by our good friend and buddy, Branko Marcetic, to talk about a whole host of stuff. Be sure you tune in for that. And hopefully next week, we'll be able to get some of this merch out to y'all. Take care, everybody. We'll see you all in just 15 minutes or so in the post game.
Peace.